We're going to be starting the session. Sorry for the delay. We had a little bit of overrun in time in the other session. I'd like to invite you to this panel. I'm Tanya Massa, Director of Programs. This session is called Home Healthcare Transition from Hospital to Home. In addition to being the Director of Programs, I'm also the Sector Lead for Advanced Health at OCE. Enabling people to manage their chronic illnesses at home and for others to quickly regain independence after hospital stay ensures a higher quality of life while reducing the financial burden on healthcare systems. This session will highlight some of the innovative research underway in the field of medical devices and illustrates the bringing together of healthcare technology divisions of major multinational companies, startup companies, small and medium-sized businesses, producing the latest breakthrough technologies. It's my distinct honor to introduce you to our moderator this session. Mickey Milner is a board member of the Health Technology Exchange. Mickey has served as a visiting professor at institutions locally and abroad. He is the founding director of the Ontario Rehabilitation Technology Consortium, the former CEO of HTX, and also Professor Emeritus at the Institute of Biomaterials and Biomedical Research at University of Toronto. Mickey, you can join us. Oops, get your name placard there. Great, thanks.
Many thanks indeed, Tanya. Very much appreciate the introduction. Good afternoon to one and all, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to welcome you to this panel session, Home Healthcare, Transitioning from Hospital to Home. And to begin, meet our panelists, whom I'm happy to introduce. The first of which is Amos Adler. And Amos is the founder and president of Memotext. He's led the design and deployment of dozens of patient adherence programs globally, while advocating for evidence-based approaches to technology-based behavior change. Next panelist is Trish Barbato, Senior Vice President of Home Health Business Development at Revera, with responsibilities for the operations and growth of Revera's home care, as well as retirement division, and leading business development initiatives in Canada and the United States. Third panelist is Vladimir Pekar, and as Research Program Manager at Philips Healthcare, he supervises and coordinates clinical research activities and new technology assessments in Canada. And our finalist panelist is Nicholas Zamora, who's Chief Clinical Advisor for TELUS Health. And in this role, he advises on go-to-market and business for their solution products and services, ensuring the optimal delivery of clinical and business benefits to the healthcare system. I'm pleased to welcome this very distinguished panel, and I'd ask that you please hold your questions until the Q&A at the end of the panel presentations. And I'd now like to give each of the panelists the opportunity to speak about their roles in the home healthcare sector by talking about an innovative project that they've been involved in and what they learned in the process. And so, Amos.
Can you hear me? Oh, how about now? How about now? All right, cool. My name is Amos Adler. I'm one of the founders of Memotext Corp. We do programs to reduce readmissions to hospitals and to increase sales for pharmaceutical manufacturers. The way that we do that, just quickly, is we have a methodology, an evidence-based methodology that we've developed, a series of algorithms that we have employed to segment patients based on behavior, and a platform to communicate with patients using whatever technology that they prefer, whether it's voice, text, email, mobile, web, so on and so forth. What we bring to the table is essentially a view of the world that everybody is different and people change over time. So what that means is that your technology should evolve with you and understand where you are at in a particular point in time. In this context, as you transition from point of care to the home, I would say. Some of the more innovative projects that we've been involved with some larger partners are randomized control study with Johns Hopkins University, studying the effects of our programs and our algorithm on the adherence of patients in a glaucoma setting at the Wilmer Eye Clinic. other commercial studies we've done with Alliance Boots and Boots Pharmacy in the UK. We also have about 3 different programs running with various academic institutions in the US in diabetes, type 2 diabetes management particularly, and childhood obesity. So those are the types of programs that we actively engage in from an innovation perspective. That's what we do.
Okay, with that, let's move on to Trish.
Thank you very much. So my name is Trish Barbato, and I work at a company called Revera. I'll just say a little bit about it briefly. Revera has 4 operating divisions: a retirement home business, long-term care facilities, U.S. operations, skilled nursing facilities, and a home care division. And across the whole organization, we serve about 30,000 clients a day. We serve almost 100,000 unique clients every year. There's about 30,000 employees in the company. And in the home care division, we have sites, about 40 sites across the country. And so I think I'm here because I'm going to talk a little bit more from a recipient perspective as someone who, how would you sell to me your innovation or your technology, and some of the challenges that I see in trying to integrate that. Just in terms of a little bit about the home care sector, one of the things that we did do is partnered with the University of Toronto and working with their Technology for Aging Gracefully, and working on a couple of projects with them. And I think part of the thing that was attractive to us is the ability to use our own residents, our own clients, as beta test sites for products, and actually having the users work with these products and contribute to the dialogue about how it works and how it doesn't work for them directly. Also, we're going to be using our residents and clients to inform, what is it that they want that technology could help them do. So sometimes I think we have our great idea, but we don't test it out with the person that is presumably going to use it. And one of the facts that I was just sharing briefly with Nick earlier was the average age. So I think a lot of people have an idea, let's say in a retirement home, that people are maybe in their 60s or 70s, and the average age we serve is 86 years old. So that's across almost all of our divisions, whether it's retirement or home care or long-term care. So it's just interesting to think about who is actually our client and how can we really help them. And I think that's a really important component of being successful with new technology.
With that, let's move on to Vladimir.
Hello, I'm Vladimir Pekar. I work as a research program manager for Philips Canada. My background is mostly imaging. I hope in this session I won't be too biased towards imaging. But Philips certainly recognizes the value of home healthcare, and our home healthcare business unit, its focus is pretty much what the title of the session is, transition from hospital to home. So we try to address this 5% of the population which causes most of the cost burden in recent healthcare system. So we develop technical means which allow better monitoring of patients in home environment, giving them the means of remote communication with the hospital, transferring their test results to their doctors, and just provide them better quality of life by allowing allowing an earlier discharge from hospital, just to transfer them to a more comfortable environment at home. So that's very briefly an introduction.
Great, many thanks indeed. Nicholas.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. So I work with TELUS Health, and lots of people, when they think of TELUS, they think of their cell phone providers. TELUS actually invested a number of years ago, starting about 2000, into healthcare. It spent over actually about $1 billion really developing its capabilities in Canada around healthcare. It is focused on bringing electronic health records to the clinical environment such as hospitals, in physician practices, in pharmacies, and to individuals such as you and I. With that focus, to give you a sense of the size of this group, TELUS Health is the largest and was recently rated as the #1 health IT company in Canada. And it is the largest adjudicator of private drug claims in Canada and manages assets, provincial assets, such as the Ontario Drug Benefit Program that we have here in Ontario. In its recent work, it really is focused on connecting with physicians. There's over 9,000 physicians that TELUS enables with its electronic medical records so that they can help deliver better care to their patients. In that, really, the connection is about helping their patients, and which ultimately touches about 10 million. So really, what TELUS is trying to do is to automate the areas of clinical activity, connect the clinicians to each other, and to help collaborate so they can ultimately deliver better outcomes for their patients. And really, to do that, it's leveraging its telecommunications backbone and its wireless infrastructure. With developing those applications, though, a lot of it has come out of through leveraging work that's been done by a lot of entrepreneurs in the past, and we continue to collaborate with entrepreneurs. And specifically, I want to talk about a project that TELUS has been involved in the London area, where we've been working in partnership with Canada Health Infoway and London Health Sciences and St. Joseph's Hospital Research Division called the Lawson Research Institute in developing and presenting a mobile mental health application that allows individuals. At this point, we have about 400 people with either schizophrenia or depression using their cell phones to connect with their caseworker or psychologist in between visits, and to monitor their mood and communicate back with their caseworkers and have a lifeline in case of an emergency or crisis. So I've got a little video that kind of describes the impact of that project. It is being rigorously evaluated at this point in time, and that's what it's all about, is as Trish told about the benefits of working in partnership. In this one, it's an example of benefit of working with a healthcare provider as well as a research group that is evaluating independently the benefits of this program. So if you can work the video on this, you just get a good sense of what this project is about.
I was diagnosed with panic disorder, depression, and phobias. It got so bad, the panic attacks, that I had it 4 or 5 times a day. At any time, any place, anywhere, I had no idea when they would hit. I remember just shutting myself in. I couldn't golf because I couldn't leave my apartment, and that made life very miserable. It wasn't just golf that I was missing, it was a lot of other things, and I thought I was going to die. Life was not very good back then. I started golfing in 1977. I get to get out in nature, get out of my own noggin for a while. Using this app, I am able to make decisions about my own health care. I am now able to put information in, like how I feel during a certain part of the day, on a scale of 1 to 7, with 1 being very sad, to number 7, which means I'm very happy. So I can monitor that. There's even a smiley face and all that sort of thing. It could be a wake-up call for myself and my healthcare provider, and it could be a way of stopping myself from committing suicide. This is a lifeline, a really, really big lifeline. This will help a lot of people, and maybe we won't hear of a young fellow or a young lady taking their lives. At least I hope so.
interesting video which speaks to a very important aspect of communication and connectivity. Did you want to enlarge further on this?
I guess, you know, it is about that. I think some of the challenges in healthcare right now is the fact that you know, people have conditions that need to be managed on a regular basis, and it's not good enough on an individual basis. We all know that when we look at the problems in healthcare, people may be given medications, but they don't take them on a regular basis, and that may be because the side effects are too high, or it's just a matter of needing a reminder. I think the fact that individuals don't have access to healthcare providers on a regular basis, and that's a challenge when they need to get it at the point in time, and telecommunications offers that capability. I would say this project, what is neat about it is I think it's a game changer. From perspective, I've been involved in helping to think through chronic disease management strategies, lucky enough for the past 20 years, and this has all the credentials, all the sort of characteristics of a good project, but the reason why it's working is because people are, first of all, we started with a group of committed organizations. The London area had researchers and had healthcare providers that were already thinking the same way we were. So that was really important. There was an alignment, immediate alignment on the agenda and what needed to be done. We came together and we were able to think through how can we adjust. They provide feedback on the solution, and in fact, we're regularly updating the solution. So I would say this is a good example of a partnership that innovation is happening with parties coming from different perspectives, and we're trying to take something that is a small little initiative and trying to eventually, if it's proven to be of value, is to have it more broadly used.
Many thanks indeed. Thanks to all of the panelists for their invaluable insights to tackling some of the problems and issues that occur in this particular space. I'm intrigued to hear you comment on the importance of partnership, and I just wondered what fellow panelists thought about that. To what extent is partnership dominant in the way in which you do business? And what are the advantages or disadvantages, if you like? Amos, perhaps you could comment first.
Well, as the sort of resident startup on the board here on the panel, I can say that partnerships are critical to the success of any health IT venture in this, well, startup, health IT startup in this case. What we define, partnerships are sort of loose, right? So what is a partnership? Is it, to us, it can be an academic collaboration. It can be a sale of a pilot to a client, a healthcare stakeholder. So partnerships are, yes, it's a loose term. You know, working with larger stakeholders, MNEs, is absolutely critical because getting data is number one, is and should be the number one priority of any new entrant into this space. Getting validated data with credentialed academic third parties is sort of your number one goal when you're starting out in this space, as far as we can tell. And you know, so partnerships are really about that, creating that opportunity so that you can collaborate with clients, with academia, so that you can have results that you can share as you grow. Because to have, and it really depends on who you're working with, who that partner is. If you're going to come to the table with a partnership or a study or a trial of some sort and this is speaking from our own experience, of your own technology with a commercial organization, it's going to be looked at quite differently than if it's with an academic partner, for example. So, you know, to say, you know, talking from the other side of what TELUS's experience is on this angle, partnerships are critical to the success of a startup, and even more so, I would say, in health IT or in health innovation than others, because health IT and health innovation is all about data and results and third parties looking at that data and being able to reproduce that data. So that would be, that's my take on it.
Many thanks indeed. Vladimir, your take on this?
So our format of partnership, the meaning of it can be very broad because so we can work with smaller companies on certain technologies. We can work with clinical sites on certain technologies, on testing certain technologies. But for us, partnership means always bringing innovation faster to the market, right? So just to give an example, our high-tech campus in Eindhoven, the Netherlands, where Philips Research is based and more than 1,000 scientists work there, they introduced a concept of open innovation there, where companies can come into the campus and have a space there and work together in a collaborative environment. Another example is just working with certain luminary clinical sites on technologies. As Amos just mentioned, getting data is critical, right? Without the data, we cannot validate the technology. We cannot ensure it's clinically acceptable. So in many areas, we do work with clinical sites worldwide. We're just trying to find partners with certain expertise, right, where we can work together on specific technology. Just to give you one example where I was personally involved here in Canada was working with Princess Margaret Hospital, which is a leader in radiation therapy planning, or radiation therapy of cancer. The project was on therapy planning, and just out of my personal experience, I would say it was crucial to have a clinical partner to be able to develop this technology. We were focusing in this product because it just saved us a lot of time just trying to figure out how to approach certain problem because of this just very deep clinical expertise that our partners had. So that's just this example, very successful collaboration where we were able to develop a product out of it.
Many thanks. Trish, let's have your take on this.
Well, I won't. I'm going to repeat the same thing, that it certainly means a lot to many people, but I think sort of related to the topic of transition, I feel that in Canada, the transition between different parts of the healthcare system are where we have black holes often. And so for us, it means being in partnership with the other parts of the healthcare system to ensure that the client or the resident or the patient is able to move and there's some continuity, so that if they're getting some great technology in the hospital, it doesn't disappear for them once they go home. Or if they're getting something that's really working, it, again, because of the funding or some other mechanism. So I think, from our perspective, one of the ways that we have to collaborate and partner is with our other referral agencies and people that we are discharging to, so both coming in and going out. And I would say, definitely as a company, we look at many of our vendor relationships as partner relationships, because if you're going to get the best and all of the benefits out of them, you both have something to contribute in order to meet all of your objectives.
Great. I sort of get the sense from each of you that you seek out partnerships that are of relevance to your mission. What I wondered about, given that I suspect the wealth of the audience are people that come from the world of small, medium enterprise or from academe, and I wondered about the amenability of your organizations to approaches from players of this ilk. These kinds of people, to what extent do you react to them if they come along to you with an idea? And if they do, some of your history on that front would be interesting. You want to comment, Amos?
Yes and no.
Take the yes.
The yes part is, there are opportunities that are obviously available. It's not an easy thing to seek out a partner with an M&E, with a large organization. The stars have to align to a certain degree. Merit has a lot to do with it, but it's not just that. A lot of it has to do with tenacity and just going forward. So what I didn't know I was going to mention. One of the things I took in a little poll before I came in here earlier today. I walked around and I talked to some of the startups in their booths, and I would say 10% of them, and I think I talked to maybe 30, 40, and obviously not strict data here. 10% of them asked me who I was after I talked to them. only one person asked me for my card after talking to them. So I'm going to make a little US-Canada differentiation here. In the US, they ask you who you are, they take your card, and then they talk to you based on who you might be. So the approach of partnering, why you see so much more, it's very cultural. So the ability to drive through the noise is really sort of critical in creating that partnership, those partnerships, seeking it out, as you said, as per your mission. So those are, you know, from my perspective, from the little guy perspective, that's part of that's critical.
Many thanks for that. Vladimir, your take?
Yeah, for us there are some specifics in partnerships too. First of all, just because of the model how a multinational company operates, right? So it's certainly also geography-based. For us, Canada is a relatively small market, and it's quite challenging to really just to motivate people within the company to do something with the Canadian partner, because just of the geographical distance, right? Because most of the R&D activities are either located in Europe or in the United States, or even in China, in Asia. And they're looking for partners in a closer proximity to them. So, however, I'm not saying it's not possible, but there should be an obvious added value out of this partnership, right? Either some extraordinary expertise or something we cannot find anywhere else, right? This is one aspect I would like to mention, and I guess it's valid for many multinational companies operating, you know, in whatever market, right? It just market dictates how partnership look like.
Well understood. Amos, carry on.
You just triggered one thing. There's two issues. There's IP also when you're dealing with large companies. That is a barrier sometimes to collaboration, because sometimes the larger companies will throw their weight around and say, if you want to work with us, we will jointly own, or we will own the IP that comes out of this.
One very quick addition is that the small company, when they approach us, first of all, they sort of compete with our internal R&D capacity, right? And second, they must have a certain amount of luck just to be exactly where the business unit roadmap is, right? Because they're big companies also operate sort of like a plan economy, right? They plan many years ahead, like they have a roadmap, development roadmap for certain technologies, and being close to this roadmap is critical for successful partnership.
It sort of speaks to early relationships. If you want to play this game, you really have to be, as a small company, connected from an early phase and build some capacity of linkage, it sounds like to me. Trish, what about interactions with Revera?
So when I took this job 3 years ago, I was quite inundated with some great ideas. So entrepreneurs who had, you know, a wrist watch that monitored all kinds of conditions, and a falls prevention mat, and you know, there was like idea after idea after idea, and it reminded me of, you know, getting a book published. I did that a couple of years ago, and people think it's about the book. It has nothing to do with the book. It's about marketing. It's about a distribution channel. It's about like, how are you going to get paid? And I find that it's very similar with innovation and with us. We can't, as a company, we're not going to start investing. We're not a startup company. We can't manage that. That's not our thing. What we're good at is taking care of people. And yes, would we like to improve that? We absolutely would. But people have to come in with a clear idea of how is this going to work? Who is the funder? Because it can't be us. We have a certain margin, we have a certain return that we have to come in with. And so I think, you know, my advice to entrepreneurs is you have to think about how will this work in our very fragmented and complicated funding system in Canada. How will your idea work? Who is going to pay for it? Are you feeling that it's going to be the client? And if it's the client, how are you going to get to them? How are you going to communicate them? How are you going to get over the barrier that Canadians don't feel they should pay for healthcare? So when you ask them to pay for your device, they'll kind of look at you and say, well, shouldn't the government be paying for it? So how are you going to get over that? What is the channel? What is the pathway for your idea to get to market and to be funded and for somebody to pay for it? And who is the somebody? People want governments. Everybody is after the government to pay for everything. I was just at a fundraiser with Deb Matthews on Wednesday, the Minister of Health, last week, and there was this really keen entrepreneur who went right up to her, shook her hand and said, I have the best wound care product in the universe and I want to talk to you about it. And and the minister just sort of looked at her like, okay, well that's great. Why don't you talk to my chief of staff over here? I mean, they can't deal with it either. A government can't deal with all of these ideas. So to me, there has to be as much time, I think, spent on the distribution, the marketing, the funding, and how is that going to happen as much as you're doing on the actual thing you're creating. Because you can spend years on that thing, but if you can't get paid for it, it's not worth that much. So I think up front, more time could be spent on that. And that's where I think I could be of more help for our company, is to give you assistance on here's how the funding works, here's what might be helpful, here's what wouldn't be helpful, talking to clients, talking to people who would use the product to say, would you pay for this? What's your price point? And spending more time on that so that there's a kind of a clear line of sight of how you're going to get from A to your ultimate desired goal of, I don't know, being a multimillionaire or something. So how is that going to happen realistically?
Sounds to me like great commercialization advice. And I wonder what Nicholas thinks of all this.
I would absolutely agree with what was just said. I say that's the big challenge out there. In healthcare, we know there are key problems that if you've been in it for a while, you know what they are. And your product probably, if you're focusing on one, will be able to address it and you can see the benefits. But then the next question is who's going to pay? The business model in itself, they are in flux, but not as much as, frankly, I'd like to see. It does stem from, number one, the consumer feels that they do not need to pay in Canada for some strange reason, because consumers are actually paying in Canada. A large proportion of it is private paid out of pockets. Portion of drugs, whether it's co-pay or whatever it is, or private insurance that people have, or just out of pocket. So it actually does exist. I think part of the problem we have is there's not enough of an honest dialogue around that whole aspect. And the other issue is, I think the government sometimes is comfortable saying they will pay. As an example, we know that in Alberta, they've said that they're going to provide a personal health record of some version for all Albertans. And so then they've decided to go out and purchase a product that can deliver that. But in other provinces, they say, well, we can't afford that. And what does that really mean? Is Alberta going to provide that on a regular basis for every single Albertan, or is it a group of Albertans? So I think part of that honest dialogue has to be, what will the government pay and what will they not pay? Because therein lies the opportunity. So I believe that, yes, you need to think about the business model. Yes, you need to figure out how are hospitals paid, how's Revera paid. If you want to partner with TELUS, how is TELUS paid on these things? Because in each division, in a company like TELUS, which is a Canadian company, we actually have an arm that does venture cap and does invest. Except it's typically in the areas of mature companies that have a mature product and some revenue that goes, and they're looking for that scalability. How can they go from, an organization that's sort of suffering to try to make ends meet, but it wants to expand? And recently we've been purchasing electronic medical records, and we've done that. We've made a commitment to do that. But they were companies that were started by entrepreneurs. Actually, in every single case, it was physicians who started it, drove out a really interesting product, but they were struggling to meet all the requirements out there. And then we came in and we purchased them, And the entrepreneurs are now involved in a bigger organization because healthcare has big problems in infrastructure. At the same time, we're working with smaller projects. So it's, and these smaller projects, you know, I said this about the mental health application. If it proves to be of value, awesome. That's one step in the whole process. We got a long way to go then to say, who's going to pay for that at the end of the day? Is it going to come out of insurance? Is it going to come out of individuals' pockets? Is it going to come out of the government? Is going to come out of a combination of those things. So that's one of my jobs, is to figure out how do we now bring those pieces together, because the value will be proven at the end of the day. At least I hope it will at the end of the day. But that is frankly the first step of admission to participate. Then you move on.
Okay, any other comments from the panel before I open it up?
Very, very quick comment again. What
Sure.
Nick just mentioned, it just illustrates how technology development is driven currently. It's certainly now clinical evidence based, right? So before, again, just giving you an example from just my previous experience with the imaging systems, where companies were developing and competing in increasing number of slices in computer tomography or number of Teslas in MRI, and the market would adopt all of it. So right now, we cannot do that anymore. Unless there is clear clinical evidence, it brings something, right, in the clinical domain, then the company can go and invest. So that's, it just illustrates how the shift with the reimbursement model in the US mostly influenced the development of technology.
Extremely important point, the whole issue of reimbursement, quite apart from all of the other issues that you have to address in the chain from the invention to the realization of the innovation commercially. I'd like to throw the discussion open for questions with the audience at large. And I'd like to ask, if you want to ask a question, just to make sure we can hear you, to come up to the mics. And if there's a tremendous rush, I mean, I'll try and control the flow. But if you'd like to come up and address a question or two to the panel, we'd be very happy. Anyone got a burning question or issue that they'd like to relate? I was hoping to get killed in the rush, but there we go. Yeah, why don't you go ahead to the mic?
This one?
Yeah, we'll start off with this with the gentleman at the back, and then you can come forward. Go ahead.
Falls are a big issue in Canada. They cost the Canadian healthcare system over $2.2 billion each year. So from the perspective of transitioning health technologies from hospital to home, is there something that's addressing this need?
I didn't quite hear
Yeah, I
that
didn't
last.
Yeah,
Can
I
you
think
speak up?
we're all having trouble hearing with
Yes,
the
we
system.
are.
So can you shout?
Yeah.
Or
Sorry,
can
I
we
have a
crank the
cold,
volume
so-
up?
Yes, so falls are very costly on the healthcare system. It costs the Canadian healthcare system over $2 billion each year. And so from the perspective of home healthcare, transitioning from hospital to home, how is this need being addressed?
How are the issue of minimizing costs is what you're talking about?
Yes, minimizing just falls in general, the cost from falls in
Cost
general.
of falls in particular. Any comment on that?
I can start.
Go ahead.
I know we are actively working on a solution with a hospital academic partner, and there's a number of other ones, particularly in the U.S. There's a lot of work being done on transition of care, so taking like the medication record and the discharge record, and working with that along with the EMR. There's a lot of work being done in that sort of transition piece and trying to figure it out, because in the US there's the whole 30-day readmission penalties that are going to be coming into effect in 2014. And yeah, the American healthcare reimbursement rules make ours look like a walk in the park, really. So yeah, there is a bunch of work that's being done there, particularly with like things like outbound calling, like live people that are assigned to a patient. And these are really getting traction, as well as technologies like ours with outbound automated calling and questionnaires and doing screens on people, finding out if they're adhering and all that kind of stuff. So as far as I can see, there's a lot of activity a ton of noise in the US, in the app world as well. I don't know about the world here as much, but I know there's a lot of activity.
Go ahead, Vlad.
So I just mentioned in the introduction, transition from hospital to home is exactly for the focus of our business unit working in this space. And if I would put on slides, just presenting this business unit, slide number 2 would contain like a diagram showing that 5% of cases would cause over 50% of healthcare costs, right? So focusing on this population, right? So just all we can do to enable early discharge from hospital for these people and continue monitoring and following them in the home environment, right, would contribute already significantly to reducing the healthcare cost burden.
Any other comments on this?
Yeah, just to say on a very practical basis that all clients in home care do receive a falls assessment, generally either by the nurse or the case manager, at least a first tier one, even if they're not at risk of falls, and they would get a more in-depth one if they were at risk of falls. So certainly it's high on the awareness list for home care agencies. One thing I'll say though, again on a practical basis, sometimes people fall because they want to try and walk. So are we going to remove that right? So I don't think zero, my point being 0 falls is probably not the right number. If we're going to have freedom for our seniors to take risks and make choices and try and get out of bed by themselves, try to go to the bathroom, then 0 we have to have some tolerance. If we want people to have and live their life and have choices, then we're going to have falls, right? And we just want to be able to manage that in the best way possible. But just to add that point.
Any other points? Go ahead.
I would say that if you've got a product that supports that, and addresses that issue, I think what you'd need to do is find out. One place is, on the government side, you need to find a program where the government is focused on that issue or the issue above that, right? Which is, which was mentioned earlier, the area of readmissions. What's the impact of people falling and what percentage of them end up being readmitted? In Ontario, we have a program called Health Links, which is a new initiative which is focused on the elderly, focused on the top 5%, focused on addressing the challenges such as readmissions, right? So hopefully when you get people out, that they don't come back in. And we know that is a problem because you get frequent flyers causing this, hence the idea is to get kind of laser focused. And if you can help support the government in their laser focused programs with a solution, then that dialogue is really a worthwhile dialogue. But you will need to find out, is that the case? Is there a program that you can kind of support and enable? And who are the organizations that have said they wish to go after those funding? Because you on your own probably won't be able to get it. You'd have to have a partner out there that has said this is a priority. So the Health Links program basically said for each one of the regions, the LINs, that they need to determine what are their priorities and how are they going to go after that top 5%. But if some have said that they want to go after falls as one of those ways of doing it, so that's, I think, what we've been saying before, which is figure out what is it, how are you going to, and that's only from a government standpoint, right? Then there are other areas, but I think that's in your area, transition from hospital to home and hopefully not back is what you're in that game. And those are the kinds of things that you need to look at, find out where do you fit in, how can you help others, how can you be part of a joint proposal that goes into these programs.
Many thanks indeed. Some very good advice and some generalized advice if you consider other areas as well. The lady in the front here who wanted to make a comment.
Thanks. I think Nicholas has just addressed the comment that, or the question that I had, and that is that the large drug companies now, for drug development, they're looking at partnerships that address specifically articulated healthcare system needs. And I wondered, is that the same in the MAT sector? And I think you just sort of said that. The research or the projects that are supported and with the collaboration are projects that are specified as being the priority of the healthcare system. Is that correct?
Okay, any comments? Or you?
I wasn't specifically thinking of the drug companies. Clearly, I was thinking about other, but I think you're absolutely right to think that broadly. I would agree with that. You know, there are other organizations that are starting to do that.
Okay, here come another couple of questions.
Jeff Graham from MindTech. We've talked a lot about...
Could you talk up a little bit?
Sure. We've talked a lot about partnerships as well as technology, and I'm wondering, from your organization's perspective, what strategies do you use to weed out the effective from the not so effective technologies when you're making a decision to partner or to adopt or even to develop a new technology?
Anyone want to tackle that broad question about decisions to be made about weeding out the winners from the losers?
I'm just going to repeat what I said before. I think there has to be a clear line of sight to who is paying. How are we mutually going to benefit from whatever that technology is? So that's, to me, quite an important component. Is it at a price point that's going to work? Or is it, so high or so capital intensive that it's just not going to get enough traction? It's not going to have enough practicability. The other thing that personally I like to see is that the company has done a lot of really good work around who are their competitors. Who else is in this space? Where else is this technology being done, and where and how? And probably the third thing, which links to what Nick said, is it a burning platform issue for the government, if that is one of the sources of revenue that we are hoping to get? So there's a couple of high ticket items on their agenda right now. Does it hit any of those? Whether it's the ALC issue or readmits to emergency, et cetera.
Okay.
I can comment.
Amos?
I can comment on how we've been weeded out in the past. One thing, though, there's a few tickets to the game that we've had to come to the plate with, which is, for example, HIPAA and PIPEDA. Whatever you're doing has to be secure, and that's number one. And then, ideally, people say, and Trish was saying, have an idea of your environment, basically. Make sure you know what's going on. So that's definitely helped us. And just having data has got us, so it's one of those chicken and egg things. How do you get the collaboration without the data? Having more data helps you get more collaboration. So it's just one of those data things.
Great. Well, I guess we have 1 minute or so left for the last question. And I would suggest that you feel free to linger back and try and latch on to some of the panelists if you fail to get your question answered. Please carry on.
Hello, my name is Ali from Trita. I have a question for Nick, but I welcome the feedback of other panelists. Does TELUS have any strategy for supporting, connected assistive technologies?
Sorry, to connect with what technology?
Connected assistive technologies. So assistive technologies that are in telecommunication area, who can connect, for example, patients to their caregivers. Technologies like that, not necessarily to health providers, but any assistive technology that can be sold to, caregivers or the patient themselves.
Yeah,
I think he's talking about assistive technologies in the broader sense, assistive technology that would be utilized in the field rather than in a home care environment. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So these assistive technologies that can be connected via a communication network, right? So the assistive technologies that can give feedback, send feedback to caregivers or any other providers. Does TELUS have any
Well,
strategy?
first of all, where TELUS is heading is trying to enable individuals and providers to individuals to be more self-reliant in their healthcare, and therefore they need to be, but to do that, they need to have a connection to their care provider, and including, frankly, you know, their community providers, whether it's other kinds of programs, whether it's family members. So it is about connection. Communications is about connections, and it's about leveraging the internet. So absolutely, and I think I was hearing a bit of sort of decision support in that. I think you were saying in there as well. So it's not just about the connection, but it's about helping individuals to have access to best practice guidelines and to be cared for according to those best practice guidelines. Because that's part of the trouble we have, is there's all these great ways that we know that people are supposed to be cared for, but never gets down to the individual until, you know, 15, 20 years after we figure that out. So I would agree with that, and assisting them based on new information, I think that is the future. So absolutely, that's the kind of thing that we are trying to enable and to help work with companies to make that happen. So we are interested in those things.
So many thanks indeed for your question, and much appreciation to the panelists for intriguing answers to these questions. I think we, in light of the usual enemy time, we have to wind up. But I just wanted to make a few comments about some of the learnings from today. I think we heard some very important commentary about real-life testing and evaluation. Absolutely critical to know whether the product really works in the way that it's intended to do. We also heard about the importance of clinical reimbursement. Someone has to pay for the product. That's an absolutely critical aspect. So you have to do your homework on that front, quite apart from all of the other elements that attach to matters. Also, a very important point is don't inhibit the issue of risk-taking. We really have to have people free to try to do things, to be independent and so forth. So there's a lot of judgment required in dealing with people in the home care environment and in other healthcare environments where you don't want to inhibit the recovery of patients. You want them to be sort of self-thinking and independent. I think that it's important for people to note that you can contact the various panel members through OC's Book a Meeting service on the Discovery website. And with that, I'd just like to again express thanks to the panel and turn matters back to Tanya for her to attend to closure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a great discussion. I really appreciate it. I think we all really appreciated your frank insights on partnerships and the winding road of commercialization. It really shines the light on terms of how partnerships can impact the different kinds of clients, and we heard a few. We've heard home care facilities, external facilities. We've heard direct patients. We've heard about healthcare providers as well. So thank you so much for providing that insight. Just to acknowledge our panelists: Amos Adler, Vladimir Pekar, Trish Barbato, Nicholas Zamora. We really appreciate you taking time to be here with us today. As a token of our thanks, we have a little parting gift, and I'll give it to you in just a moment as a small gesture of appreciation. And a special thanks to Mickey Milner for leading the show for us today. And in this theater, the next session will be Transforming Your Business with High-Performance Computing, and that should be starting in the next 10-15 minutes. Thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy the rest of Discovery. Thank you very much.